Hello everyone, and welcome to today's CRM Magazine web event brought to you by Pitney Bowes, Melissa, Neustar, and Redpoint Global. I'm Bob Fernikes, and I'm the publisher of CRM Magazine, and I'll be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled, Getting Big Data in Shape, Quality, Cleansing, and Data Management. Today we'll be discussing all things data quality, and we've got a great group on today, so I just want to explain how you can be part of the broadcast. If you have any questions during the presentations, just type them into the submit box, into the question box, and click submit. We'll get to them at the end of the presentations. There'll be a 10-minute Q&A section, and if we can't get to them during that period of time, we'll follow up within a few days by email. Also, if you'd like a copy of the presentation, you can download it from the PDF on the PDF icon on the resource icon once the event is archived. We'll also have some bonus information from our speakers today, so that'll be a good reason to return to the event tomorrow. Now to introduce our speakers, we have Dan Kernaghan. He's the Director, Big Data Solutions at Pitney Bowes. We've got Charles Gaddy, Director of Global Sales and Alliances, Melissa. We've got Devin de Blasio, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Neustar, and Steve Zinks, he's a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Redpoint Global. If you'd like to review the speaker's bios, just click on the arrow under their photos. So now I'm going to pass the event over to Dan Kernaghan. He's the Big Data Evangelist at Pitney Bowes. Welcome to the broadcast, Dan.
Thank you very much, Bob. For those of you who are not familiar with Pitney Bowes software, we have leveraged our legacy in mail and postal services to become experts in all things location, right? We work with customers to surface relevant business insights by understanding the relationship between people, places, and things. I've recently come to Pitney Bowes from one of the big data distributions, and I specifically came to work on big data solutions that involve location. At Pitney Bowes, we focus on data quality in a way that involves these 6 dimensions, right? All of them dealing around address. The first one, completeness, understanding that the data is accurate, consistent, what's missing and what's there or what's unusable. If you think about, or if you've ever had the chance to work with oil and gas data, you'll understand this exactly, right? Completeness is very important. Relevance, think social media data, right? Is the data effectively related, stored in a common and functional layout? Reliability, is the data timely, up to date? Think about news feeds, right? If you're working with big data and you're pulling in many different sources, this can be a complicated process, and a lot of the data isn't necessarily reliable. Validity, can the sources be verifiable? Very common with social media data. Accuracy, is the data valid? Can it be confirmed across multiple data sources? I see many times email contact information that is actually horrible, very difficult to use. So you make sure that your tool set is capable of handling data of that type. And of course, timeliness. As we move toward real-time data feeds, timeliness in telematics data, sensor metrics becomes extremely important. So in the end, does your data quality solution handle all of those various dimensions? At Pitney Bowes, we're proud to be trusted for both precision and accuracy in the way that we handle location data and data quality for location. I've been working with big data for a few years now, and I've noticed that there's a few common threads that are repeated in an effort to find usable data for big data applications, right? The first one being consistency. You can always write something in Java, and most of the big data world involves writing custom code in Java. But one thing that I look for in any big data application is consistency. Is it capable of processing data on any of the platforms, not just big data, right? Not every problem is a big data problem. So do I get consistent results from my software, whether or not I'm working with legacy platforms, big data platforms, or the newly evolving real-time platforms? Second challenge is the architecture itself, right? Software to support enterprise solutions for big data are hard to come by, right? And when I mean enterprise, I mean all of the factors that involve enterprise data: security, governance, accessibility, across the board. And then, of course, rapid evolution of the platform. I don't think I need to tell anyone on the phone here, big data is changing almost weekly, right? So ensuring that you have a platform that's capable of handling the rapid evolution of what has become big data is critical in your success for achieving data quality on this platform. So when I talk about consistency, this is actually very critical. There aren't a lot of platforms out there that can handle complex data flows, meaning data coming in from what we're used to working with the standard ETL tools that can also support big data. You've got to remember, not all problems are big data problems. So a lot of times I need to be able to handle legacy data using legacy tool sets and be able to easily merge and meld that data on a big data platform using massive batch loads or even real-time process flows. The ability to use a single product to apply the same logic and, more importantly, provide the same reference data, apply the same reference data to all workloads across this platform is incredibly important and is often overlooked. The enterprise approach, so it's a very challenging architecture. Being able to simplify big data processing is easier said than done. In many cases, most of the software tools that I see out there try to pull data out of Hadoop and process it on a legacy platform. It's difficult to find tool sets that can process 100% natively in Hadoop while still offering interoperability with the traditional platforms. Something that can extend beyond the big data languages of Java, Python, and R, and allow point-and-click visual tool sets that give you the capability to easily process data inside of big data. And more importantly, ones that offer the traditional legacy solutions for security, resource management, and configuration management. Those tend to be huge holes in most of the big data ecosystem even today. And then finding a solution that can commit to big data, right? The rapid evolution of this platform means that you have to stay on top of it. It's difficult by everyone's measure to continually evolve with the platform, right? The new one that I see in increasing amounts is microservices architecture. So being able to support the entire Hadoop ecosystem along with the new and improved processing frameworks. I mean, we're looking at, we've got Spark under our belts now, and now we're looking at Flink. We're looking at several other new processing frameworks that are coming out. And at the same time, I'm seeing an ever-increasing demand for DCOS, Docker services, for microservice platforms that have to be a part of the big data platform, right? So finding a company that's willing to commit to the changes that are happening and keep up tends to be easier said than done, right? You've got to find software products that have that are able to keep up with the architectural changes and are making progressive engineering efforts to keep up. I want to just say that in this particular case, Pitney Bowes can help. We have crafted solutions around all of this, all of these important capabilities that I outlined. If you need more information, please reach out to me, Daniel Kernigan at pb.com, and I would invite you to download our white paper, The Spatial Data Lake Solution. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Bob.
Hey, thanks so much, Dan. Now we have our next speaker. Again, it's Charles Gaddy. He's the Director of Global Sales and Alliances at Melissa. Welcome to the broadcast, Charles.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. So I'll pick up pretty much right where Pitney left off. I'm also going to talk about elements of data quality. We also have 6 concepts we'll be covering in the next few slides. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, first one. Data quality and the big data markets. It's interesting to note just how data quality as a market in the space has evolved over the years since 2012, for example. We've seen substantial growth there in adoption, and when this first started, you were looking at simple challenges of how do we, well, they weren't simple, they were hard to do, but the idea of ingesting all this data, how do you get all the data into the data lake, right? For the first few years that we were involved, and we were talking about data quality, whether it was big data or regular size data, if you will, a lot of it was around simply, we're not ready yet, we can't even get everything into the lake yet. And then over time we saw that evolve, and as that evolved, and ingestion became less of an issue, we started talking to people about the challenges of what's actually in that lake. So some stats that I'll just give you verbally here. 60% of IT leaders say that their organization lacks accountability for data quality. And that's a pretty large number. And when you look at adding these new systems like these big data lakes, that only compounds the problem when you're moving data into other systems and you want to extract that out and make actionable analytics out of it. You're really dealing with challenging situations in dealing with the data within big data. So what is data quality? Whether it's big or whether it's small, data quality ultimately is an assessment of the fitness of the data for a particular purpose. Whether you're trying to use some tools to take unstructured data that might be stored in the data lake, make it structured, standardize it, use authoritative sources to verify and correct it. No matter what you're trying to do there, ultimately you're dealing with taking something that being unstructured and in large volumes with large velocity, and you're trying to make it something that's fit for use from a data quality perspective, which then can ultimately be used for analytics. Okay. 6 concepts. The 6 concepts around data quality. The nice thing about these concepts is they're portable. They are applicable to traditional data quality projects, whether it's master data management, customer data stores. They're also, of course, absolutely viable as it relates to big data. So the first one is the completeness of the data. So whether you're looking at a traditional relational database or unstructured data, at some point you've got to get that data in a form that you can assess how complete it is. The guy at PB earlier was talking about address data, right? So how complete is the address data that you might be trying to use from this big data store? Does it have a postal code? Does it have a city? Can it be standardized and verified and corrected based on authoritative postal sources? The completeness of the data and what data is missing can be very relevant depending on what sort of analytics or business process you're trying to power ultimately with that data. The next one, conformity. So completeness is great. We think we've got all the pieces, but does it conform to actual standards? Sticking to the address example, there's about 175 different address formats around the world. Do you have, when you deal with this data, are you taking that unstructured data and are you creating something that when you find it's an address, is it a German address in the correct format? Is it a U.S. address with the house number at the front? And so on and so forth. You find phone numbers. Are they actually phone numbers with country codes? Do you need to append the country codes? How do you standardize? How do you make it conform, right? The next one you've got here, consistency. And this has less to do with the conformity aspects and more to make sure that the actual data itself over time is consistent and not fluctuating, within the data set as you try to create a more structured data set from that larger big data set. Inconsistency between data values plagues many companies, and attempts to reconcile between these different systems can also be a challenge, and throwing in another data source like big data only compounds that. Next one here I've got for you is accuracy. So, do the elements, entities represent real world information, right? Am I pulling out a bunch of Mickey Mouses and James Bonds from all of this data that I've got, or am I actually finding real names associated with other data elements? Are they correctly spelled, or are we able to standardize or make them consistent and conform as well as being accurate around that different information? Next, integrity. So what data is missing, and is it important to using that data for other purposes, right? Let's say you're trying to power a sales dashboard. We're trying to power a sales dashboard that you've pulled out of some data lake with large amounts of information, and you're trying to use data quality to create actionable analytics. You'd better make sure that the integrity of the data ultimately is solid, because there's nothing worse than trying to plot on a graph or on a map, sales for your sales director and his dashboard, only to find out all of this information lands in one place because data quality was not implemented across the board, and the mapping and the plotting of the other elements just falls short. Last one, duplication. Having thousands of records which are just variations, non-standardized variations that ultimately get created off of this process, it doesn't back up, or it's critical to remove, let's say, duplicates, because those multiple entities can introduce numerous vulnerabilities and risks within the overall analytics or actionable effort you were trying to put forward with that data to begin with. So, when you look at the big data landscape overall, some of the key tools you look at that can be used for these purposes are things like profiling, being able to profile streams of data as they're moving into or out of the data lake, and use that metadata and profiling information in order to produce rule sets, or to apply rule sets that help to begin that that standardization, verification, and correction process that you're going to need. The other part of profiling is it can help you determine what sort of entities may be available for extraction, and then actually help you over time, after a series of profiling efforts, to determine the reliability of the ultimate analytics you've produced off of that. So profiling exposes gaps. It also clarifies the content you're looking at. Oddities, aberrations, and trends can be seen if you're profiling large amounts of data moving through into or out of a data store. Data quality and reliability in analytics. So the example of trash in, trash out has existed before there was big data, right? Large data sets can only compound that. If you've got a large amount of information that cannot be successfully utilized when it comes to making it actionable, it's a large amount of useless information as it relates to analytics. So I've got a note up here: analytic maps for the world where all data is in Afghanistan are useless. So this is a variation on that sales example I mentioned to you. I've actually been in projects where I've seen every country every data element be categorized to one country, which produces terrible results. So entity extraction is a key part of this. So if you're dealing with unstructured data and you're looking to pull structured pieces out, you need to be able to find those pieces and extract those individual entities and make them useful in a structured way so you can build towards analytics. So that can be data standardization. That can also involve deduplication and matching that we were talking about earlier. And it can involve looking at customer or contact data. Maybe you're looking for email, name, IP address, phone number, etc. But can also deal with product data and product stores. So maybe it's looking at and standardizing and matching different SKUs from a large product set. That sort of thing can be applied here as well. Authoritative sources for quality. This is one I always like to end with when I'm having this discussion, because it's really the key point in being able to make what you want to pull out useful in making decisions, right? If I have a large volume of data coming through at a large velocity, if I can't analyze that and use an authoritative source, postal data we've mentioned several times, right? Maybe it's identity verification even, data to say that a person's at a place, change of address data, telco data sets. If I can't use authoritative data sources to actually, match up to and say that what I'm trying to use is of a high quality, then I'm in a position where I've got nothing but garbage to use instead of actionable analytics. So I'd like to thank you for giving me the time to speak a bit about this, and would love the opportunity to talk to you some more about how data quality can be deployed in big data. So at this point, Bob, I'll pass it over to you.
Hey, thanks so much, Charles. I just want to remind our audience, if you have any questions for Dan or Charles or our next two speakers coming up, please, would like to have a good Q&A at the end of the presentations. Now I'm going to pass the event over to Devin DeBlasio. Again, he's the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Neustar. Welcome to the broadcast, Devin.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Really appreciate it. I'm going to skip through to the speaking slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with Neustar, we're a leading global information services provider driving the connected world forward with trusted, holistic identity resolution. As the only company capable of understanding who is on the other end of every interaction, Neustar is trusted by the world's greatest brands to grow and guard their businesses, transforming their customer data into customer intelligence. So in today's connected world, the greatest businesses are built on a foundation of customer data. We've seen a renaissance of data-driven marketing over the past 5 to 10 years, where customer-obsessed organizations have refocused their attention, moving away from creative first, doubling down on data collection and data activation. This craving for intelligence has driven these organizations to acquire as much data as they can handle. First party, second party, third party, modeled, survey, behavioral, no matter the source or the quality. Enterprises have become so reliant on this constant stream of data, they now depend on it to influence how their marketing strategies are built, executed, and evaluated. Organizations are spending millions, if not billions of dollars ensuring that they are extracting every last bit of intelligence from the data they own, as well as the data they are acquiring. For many organizations, the amount of data they own or have access to can often distract from the underlying quality of that data. At Neustar, we believe that with better data comes a better understanding of who your customers are, and as well as their identity. In order to produce the best picture possible, you need to have a clear understanding of their complete identity, not just that moment in time or on that channel or device. It's an understanding of where they came from and where they are most likely going on their journey. The reality for many organizations, unfortunately, isn't a clear holistic picture. It's a fragmented mess of data points and disparate signals kept in silos. Without a way to connect the dots across the customer journey, much of the data that these organizations are built on is stale, incomplete, or just plain wrong. Often, marketers will focus on channels first, without looking at the greater picture of the customer journey. Without a way to make a connection between the offline and online signals that make up a whole person, organizations will continue to struggle to make sense of that customer journey. Without a bridge across this identity gap, the decisions that marketers make will be misinformed, the calculations and models that analysts build will be inaccurate, and the databases and CRM systems that IT directors manage will become unruly and overtly expensive. Now, there are many roadblocks getting in between you and better data. When we look at offline data, we know that people are changing their name, their phone number, their addresses, and even their email throughout their journey. Every year, we see millions of these identity fragments become invalid and unusable. And when we look at the amount of digital signals that consumers are providing, it continues to grow at a rapid rate. Whether it's cookies, mobile ad IDs, IP addresses, social profiles, consumers are constantly sharing and updating these digital breadcrumbs along their purchase path. With such a rapid rate of change and explosion of new yet fleeting signals, Neustar has seen that only in 2 years, 60% of the data in most CRM systems are out of date or invalid without an identity management process in place. Now, I want to take a minute just to talk about CRM systems. So we really see CRM systems as the lifeblood for many B2C organizations. And the traditional data management vendors that most organizations have in place today simply just can't keep up with this rapid rate of change. Without proactively refreshing and collapsing customer records on a regular cadence, you're essentially infecting your entire organization with bad data. Specifically for the marketer who depends on a constant stream of customer intelligence, the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why, they will fail to make a relevant connection with their customers without understanding if they are in market or when something has changed along their journey that would require a trigger-based engagement. So it's really time to build one single view of your customer. It's time to build that connection between offline and online, anonymous and known, to maintain a persistent and stable view of identity. This requires building a new identity management strategy from the inside out, repairing and enriching the data you have today so that you can use everything you know to be true and effective with your core customers to power smarter marketing decisions in the future. A single customer view will provide a greater understanding of omnichannel shoppers. It will reduce the costs and waste associated to traditional CRM systems, and it will allow you to deliver more relevant, more impactful experiences across channels. It's time to build a singular, transparent understanding of your customer that your entire organization can rely on. Now, building a single persistent customer view is not easy. It's going to require a fundamental change in how your enterprise manages your customer data. It will require a complete enterprise level shift in data collection, data qualification, and data activation practices. But getting it wrong today, as fast as the ecosystem changes and as much as customers expect from their brands, doing nothing now will cost exponentially more in the future. There are 5 main components that we would like to focus on as we walk you through the process in executing a superior identity management strategy, and what steps Neustar is performing today to make your data better. So the first we want to talk about is consolidation, right? It's consolidating your data, collapsing those disparate systems, and looking across all of your customer records to essentially deduplicate any of those visions of those consumers that are duplicative, right? So you want to make sure that across all of your disparate business silos and systems and CRM processes, you want to make sure that you're consolidating and building a single view of that customer based on that PII information that you have today. The next is you want to make sure that the information you have in those customer records is complete. Using authoritative sources, as we discussed earlier, the information that you can provide to continually corroborate that information using things like name, address, phone number, email, data sources. Essentially what you're doing is you're going to be removing everything that's bad about those records, right? Any out-of-date information of address, any old phone numbers, and you want to replace that with the most accurate and up-to-date identity information as possible to make sure all of your records are clean and accurate as well as complete. The next step is enriching that data. So not only understanding who they are based on their name, address, phone number, and email, but taking a step further. When you have a complete picture of identity, you can then hang additional pieces of records off of that customer identity. Demographic, geographic, psychographic information, how they're engaging with your addressable media, how they're engaging with your brand, both online and offline. These breadcrumbs are really, really important when you're building not only retention strategies, but acquisition strategies to help you understand who this person is so you can build better marketing strategies to engage with them in a more relevant way. The next is persistence. So this concept of always-on identity management. So most traditional CRM systems and processes you have in place are updating your data maybe every month, maybe porting the data every quarter. That's not fast enough to essentially engage with consumers when they're changing rapidly along their journey. So at Neustar, what we do is we have essentially something called always-on identity management. We're persistently monitoring the identity and the changes in identity. So as soon as a piece of identity data is changed, we will then route that information back to your system as quickly as possible. And finally, unified. So we just talked a lot about offline identity data, identity sitting in your CRM systems, but you have to understand that people are omni-channel shoppers, right? So they're not only giving you their name, address, phone number, email when they're shopping in store, or when they're responding to an email, but they're also leaving digital breadcrumbs, right? So you need to understand how they're engaging with your addressable paid media, how they're engaging with you across display, across search, across addressable TV, as well as what's happening on your website. All these pieces or signals of information that they're providing to you make up a full picture of that person's identity. So at Neustar, what we're really looking to do is connect that offline intelligence data that you have in your CRM system with the digital attributes and behaviors that are happening across all of your addressable media and your website properties. And when you take these 5 steps really to complete that picture of that customer, creating a single view, what you're doing is essentially creating actionable intelligence. So not only are you able to understand who your customers are today and then re-engage with them down across that journey, increasing their lifetime customer value, you're also able to use everything you know about these consumers to essentially build better and smarter marketing strategies to engage with people who you don't even know yet. So why not use as much information as you can about the customers you know and the ones that are actually have a propensity to purchase, and use that information to build smarter segmentation and smarter acquisition strategies across digital media. So that, I just want to make sure that you guys understand Neustar is here to make your data better. If you wanted to learn more about how to create a single view, about all of our authoritative identity sources, and how to essentially enrich your existing CRM systems, please just contact us to learn more. Thanks. Back to you, Bob.
Hey, great. Thanks, Devin. I just want to remind everybody that if you want to download the slide decks as PDFs, you can do that tomorrow on the archive. And there'll also be some bonus information from our contributors here on the console as well tomorrow. So now I'm going to pass the event over to Stephen Zisk. He's the Product Marketing Manager at Redpoint Global. Welcome to the broadcast, Steve.
Thank you very much, Bob. Some of what I have to say is going to be similar to some of the things that you've heard before, but I do want to bring the problem back to what the initial challenge is, what you're trying to accomplish, and how you'll be able to know whether you're accomplishing what you want. There's an old saying, when you're up to your neck in alligators, it's tough to remember you came here to drain the swamp. And that's kind of the position that we're in with big data right now. It's useful to remember that our goal in using big data, putting together a data lake, pulling all that information together and so on, is to get the insight that we need to improve customer engagement. And that's, as several other people have said, that's not just a big data challenge. It's really a data problem in general. Focusing on the positive side, Forrester found that 19% of sales lists are due to personalization, which is why we want all of our customer experiences, all of our CX, to be personal. Similarly, you can gain or miss huge competitive advantage, according to Forbes magazine, by becoming a leader in using your data to drive insights in marketing and get better customer retention in the bargain. The whole point of all of this is to provide data-driven marketing, and data-driven marketing is going to save you money and boost growth, but only if the data itself can support your efforts. So if we take a little bit of a look at how that happens and how we got to big data, we'll understand that data is actually being created by a new generation of connected customers. They expect cheap and always available internet and simplified interfaces to get at that internet. They're using multiple apps and those interfaces to research, share, discuss their ideas, look at products at a speed that's breathtaking compared to what we would have seen even 10 years ago. Similarly, the explosion of smartphones, in-home devices, connected cars, GPS and other location data, IoT devices, monitors, sensors, and so on, really pushes the boundary of the types and formats of the data that we have to process. And it also, of course, pushes the volume way up. The low cost and high performance of building those devices into everything from cameras to cars to dog collars means that you have a volume of multiple exabytes of consumer data every day. In fact, more than 90% of all the consumer data ever produced and stored was created in the last 4 years. And picking out the wheat from the chaff and understanding what can be trusted and how to connect it all back to the customer while honoring customer demands, being relevant, not creepy, honor my privacy, but reward me for my loyalty. All of these different demands that customers have make that explosion of data incredibly hard to deal with. And this is really what's happened to push us to find other ways to process, store, and analyze customer data. And we've turned to data lakes as an easy solution to making that happen. But as our fishy friends found out, getting into the data ocean is really just the start of our journey. A data lake gives us a place to keep our data and a source for insight, but it doesn't actually solve the engagement challenge. That's because we've brought all of the quirks of our data, multiple different IDs, incompatible views, both from the customer's viewpoint and from our internal systems viewpoint, different cadences of data, formats, level of accuracy and trust. We've brought all of these things with us into the data lake. For big data for engagement requires that we resolve all of these differences, and we can only do that with strong focus on automation and data quality to create accurate, always available, always updating customer profiles. Automating these profiles in a consistent and accessible platform, what's now being termed a customer data platform, lets us do data quality and master data management at the speed of the customer. This is what a customer data platform really is about, whether that platform is operating in a purely legacy environment, a hybrid environment, in the cloud, against one or many data lakes, against internal and external data sources. So if we look at the goals of a customer data platform in terms of its usability, what the customers are looking for, that is what our customers, what the marketers and the service personnel and the strategic operators inside organizations are looking for, is the ability to have an internally consistent view of the customer across the different functions, and to make sure that that view is externally accurate so that they can do the hyper-personalized real-time engagement and do it in a way that feels relevant and accurate for the customer. In order to do that, we have to have a process, an automation process, that can take us from the raw data in multiple different formats that are stored in the data lake into a consistent, always-on, always-available view of the customer and of all of the entities that the customer wants to relate to. As was said earlier here, that can include things like places, products, and other things. It also ought to include the relationships between that customer and other kinds of entities like organizations, households, families. So creating that consistent view, doing the MDM processing to manage the master view of all the different kinds of entities and information, creating and persisting a golden record, an accurate and up-to-date version of what the customer is doing, and then making that available long-term for all of the different functions that need to get at the customer data is the primary goal of a customer data platform. That platform has to have an operational profile that includes zero latency. It's always on, it's always pulling data in, pulling it through the system as fast as it possibly can in order to produce the up-to-date results that are needed for following the customer in their journey, whether that journey feels like a linear or a very non-linear journey to us doesn't matter. We have to meet the customer where they are. We have to do it with a full contact graph that gives us all of the information and details about that customer in order to reach the customer appropriately. And we have to do it without losing any of the original data that came in from all of those different sources. Now, it was mentioned a little earlier that there are a lot of people who are trying to do this by using the data lake itself as a source rather than as a resource. I want to reassure you that in the last 5 years, many companies have finally caught up somewhat with the data lake and are starting to use big data arenas as a means of actually deploying and computing the information, not just a source of data. And of course, in an ideal world, this should mean that your customer data platform should be agnostic to all of the different possible sources of data that you might have. That means it's got to be agnostic to sources and sinks of data in databases and other arenas. It's got to be able to be operating on all of the different platforms of choice, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and so on. And it's got to be able to operate both in the cloud and on-premise, because there are certain industries where it's incredibly important to manage how the on-premise operations work. Last point I want to make is about machine learning. One of the things that you'll note with a lot of machine learning is that it's being treated as a panacea for being able to understand customers better. But machine learning itself depends very deeply on data quality. The point of machine learning is to take a model that's supposed to be representative of real information in the world and be able to project that model out and make predictions about customer behavior or other elements of the real world. And that will fail if you don't provide it with high data quality. So what's needed is that automated data quality mechanism that can take all of the data in from the various points of the big data world and the enterprise world and drive it out into all of the different possible types of models and types of destinations, and then take the information that's been activated in those machine learning models and drive it back to make reliable customer decisions and to connect and engage with the customers. Thanks for your time again. If you want to contact me, my contact information is here in the slide, and we've provided some additional materials on the archive. And now I'll send it back to you, Bob.
Hey, thanks a lot, Steve. That was a great presentation. Before you go away, though, I have a question. One of your slides, you referred to no latency in the operational profile. Why is latency within data quality process so important, and how do you fix or reduce latency?
It's a very good question. Latency becomes important because of the speed at which customers are operating. If you have somebody who has just appeared in store and their cell phone, or in a mall, let's say, and their cell phone gives a location information that says that they're within 200 yards of your store, you want to be able to send them a coupon that says if they come into the store now, they'll get 10% off. And you want to do that while they're in the mall. It's not useful to be able to send that kind of information out an hour from now or even 15 minutes from now. You want to be able to send it to them now. We have many customers for whom the latency requirements of our piece of the process is in the 25 to 100 milliseconds time frame, and that's because the data quality process and the customer data platform is only one piece in the chain of information. You've got to be able to get the information in from all of those different sources, do the data quality processing, the matching, the merging, the normalization and validation, drive the model if there's a model to be driven and make a decision, and then drive that decision out to the point of engagement while the customer is still active.
Great, thanks so much. Oh, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
It's all right. I realized that I had only answered the first half of your question.
Okay.
The basic solution to the latency problem is to take a very careful look at all of the different pieces of the process and make sure that they're both architecturally and performance-wise in the software designed to be able to handle the latency that's required for your process.
Great, thanks so much, Steve. I'm going to bounce back to you, Charles. I have a question for you. You don't mention ETL as a tool necessary in the process. How does Melissa work with ETL tools in big and small data?
Right, so, you know, we've built a set of technology that performs data quality functions, and we provide a platform called MDQ, which can be connected directly to service the needs from a big data quality perspective. But then we also partner with strategic vendors like Pentaho and Talon, for example, that are very well versed in the ETL and data movement or the movement of big data in order to meet those needs. So those partners, in conjunction with the big data quality capabilities, authoritative data sources, and profiling that we bring to bear, really can form a complete solution to help with managing the velocity and volume of big data, as well as the quality and usefulness of that data.
Great. Dan, I have a question I think a lot of people are familiar with and probably need an answer to. Question is, what context does accuracy and precision matter? I usually find that using lots of data means I can get an answer quickly, and that's just good enough.
That's a good question. There are a lot of use cases where good enough is good enough, but fraud, money laundering, insurance risk. I'm working on a 5G project with a large mobility customer, and they're looking to put 5G microcell antennas every 150 meters in a grid across the United States. That's a big data problem, and it requires precision and accuracy, right? I mean, there's an investment associated with every one of those antennas. So getting them in the right place, detail down to 11 centimeters. So we're putting it in an 11 centimeter grid across the entire United States. Accuracy really does matter when you're looking at spending a few $1 million on those types of assets.
Okay. Devin, sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out here. Here's a question. When picking up a vendor to help repair and update our CRM data, what qualities should we be looking for?
Sure, yeah, great question. So at Neustar, we really kind of boil it down to 4 main components. The first is the access that you would have to authoritative offline data, right? So what that means is that Neustar has essentially proprietary relationships with people on the government, utilities, telecommunications, banking. These are the industries that make it their job to know who a customer is, right? You're going to give these institutions your name, your address, your number, your email. You need to have a constant connection with them due to how important it is in the process. You want to make sure your banking account is not overdrawn, or anything to do with getting if you want your voter registration card, or you want to make sure all that information is accurate. So why not use that repository of authoritative data to then constantly corroborate your CRM, your offline intelligence data with those sources, right? So that's the first, is making sure that whoever you're working with has access to this repository of offline identity data. The second is the concept of continuous corroboration, right? So when we talk about corroboration, it's not just making sure that we're coordinating, corroborating with 1 to 2 different, 3 different sources. Neustar does it 20, 30 different sources that we're essentially corroborating that data with. So we know that your data is accurate, and we know that it's up to date. So that's extremely important when you're trying to do trigger-based marketing experiences, right? If someone is moving along their journey, maybe they had a kid, maybe they got married, you need to know these things as an organization in order to make sure that you're delivering the right message at the right time. The third is the omni-channel view, right? So we talked about connecting offline to online identity. That's extremely important with today's consumers who are jumping between channels, between touch points all the time. Without that end-to-end view, and without that view being constantly groomed and maintained, you're going to miss out, specifically when you're building acquisition strategies that rely on that omni-channel view to essentially engage with people that, when you're building lookalike modeling, for example. And the final thing that's really important is having an underlying segmentation methodology, right? So knowing someone's identity data, is great, but you need to make sure you can apply additional segmentation modeling to those users, to your core customers, to allow you to use machine learning and advanced, predictive analytic practices to essentially go after, those customers who look like your core customers. That's extremely important to make sure your marketing is efficient and effective, is to build segmentation models based off of your identity data and making sure that the company you work for has really, really good access and really good resources in order to help you attach, like we said, demographic, psychographic, geographic information to those customer records and building those lookalike models.
Great, thanks so much. Hey, Steve, circling back to you, I've heard recent discussions about data diversity. How does this impact data quality and machine learning?
Well, that's a great question, especially in light of what we were just hearing about lookalike modeling and using machine learning to look like your core customers. data diversity is a concept that's been coming up across the board in a bunch of different ways in the past year or so. I think some of it comes from things like the Me Too movement, but some of it also comes from the recognition that the accuracy of the results that we're getting from our machine learning, from our big data stores, is really dependent on how representative the data is of the people that we're trying to model. So people have heard recently about things like facial recognition problems where certain facial recognition software is very good at distinguishing people from certain parts of the world, but from other parts of the world, it has not been well enough trained to be able to distinguish them. If you have that kind of a problem in a big data area in putting your machine learning model together, the machine learning model is going to be very representative of a small fraction of the people who you're actually trying to reach. And the people who are not represented in the training data or in the data set that you used, you will not be approaching them correctly or modeling them well. So focusing on getting a diverse set of data into your big data models and projects becomes a very important thing for expanding your customer list beyond the comfort zone and the known into areas where you may desire to have customers, but you don't have as much information about the customers as you need.
Great, thanks so much. Dan, we haven't heard from you in a while. The question is, how can I avoid extracting my data from the big data environment for data quality processing?
Well, and the answer to that is make sure that you have the right component inside of big data to do the processing natively there, right? The big concept that came about, the disruptive concept that came about with big data was bring your processing to the data so that you're storing and you're doing your compute both in the same place, right? The challenge has been, I don't want to have to write a bunch of Java in order to do my data quality processing inside of my big data platform, right? So we've been waiting for quite a while for the right tool sets to come along, and there's several vendors that can provide the tool sets that allow you to natively process all your data quality algorithms inside of the Hadoop platform. Pitney Bowes certainly offers the ability to do both data quality and location spatial intelligence inside of big data natively without having to pull the data out to anywhere else to have it processed.
Okay, great. Devin, you're going to have to help me with this question. You know, we were talking before about picking a vendor. What happens when it's a company or a market segment that has really good customer data, like financial services? Any recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, obviously retailers, they have great customer data, but sometimes it's flawed. CPG clients don't really have access to customer data. So we talked about those originally, right? But let's look financial institutions, right? People who run checking, credit card information, loans. They have, like we talked about earlier, really great customer data because you as a consumer want to make sure that you're giving that financial institution the right information to keep you safe and secure and in constant communication with them. But a lot of these financial institutions are set up in business silos, right? So you have people managing the checking and banking, you have people managing cards, people managing loans, right? So those are just examples of 3 silos that Neustar has identified within financial institutions. And a lot of times what happens is that they each have their own profile of a customer, right? It could be the same customer that they're dealing with from one end to the other, but they are using different sources and different methods of collecting information from that consumer, right? So someone in the checking department may have a different complete profile of someone in the cards department. So that's a huge problem with a lot of these companies who essentially want to have continual communication with their customers, and they want to essentially increase the lifetime value or understand the lifetime value of that customer so they can sell them more things, right? So say you have a checking card information, a checking account with a bank, but you just got married and you want to buy a new house, and you're having a kid, so you have to these life events are things that these banking these financial institutions don't have access to. So someone in the home loan department doesn't understand that this person is ready to make a life decision and a life change and purchase a home. So they're unable, because they don't have access to this real-time identity information, they're unable to essentially give them the right offer at the right time, what we call a trigger-based marketing or a life event-based marketing, right? So it's all about understanding the customer journey in the context of an enterprise view of that consumer or that customer. And really, you have to make sure that your entire organization is focused on the same customer identity record, so that anytime these life events happen and you're essentially getting pushed this information as quickly as possible, you're able to efficiently actually provide this trigger-based marketing in each individual department to increase the lifetime value of your customer over time.
Great, thanks. Charles, I'm going to go to you for our last question here. And you had given a couple of examples of the difficulties involved with international data. Can you give some examples of software supporting multiple alphabets and languages?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you'd want to be able to bring to bear when you're dealing with the utilization of the data in a data lake is to be able to make sure that you can support the different alphabets and character sets that may be in the lake. So can you leverage technology like we have to offer that will do transliteration or translation or character set mapping between these different alphabets, so that you can standardize, if you remember the 6 steps I mentioned, being able to come up with something that's consistent, whether it's consistent not just in content, but maybe even in alphabet and structure. So, for example, our technology supports more than 8 different alphabets, including those that were traditionally described as double byte back in the day, and being able to move between those alphabets can be very useful as you try to improve and standardize and implement quality solutions.
Great. Well, that looks like all we have time for today. I'd like to thank everyone that joined us on today's presentation. I'd also like to thank our speakers and remind everyone that you can download copies or copy the presentations in PDF format tomorrow. If you want to send the presentation or this webcast to a colleague, you can just use the same URL. You'll also receive an email with that information. There'll be some bonus information on the archive. So just go to the resource icon tomorrow after the event is archived, and you'll be able to download different case studies and other information provided by our presenters today. So I'd like to thank our presenters and wrap everything up. We have Dan Kernigan. He's the Director of Big Data Solutions at Pitney Bowes. Charles Gaddy, Director of Global Sales and Alliances at Melissa. Devin de Blasio, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Neustar. And Steve Zisk, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Redpoint Global. And just for participating in today's event, you could win this Echo Dot. The winner will be posted on Destination CRM on April 30th, so just visit our website and see if you're the winner. And that concludes our broadcast for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's webcast. We appreciate your participation. You may now disconnect. Speakers, please stand by.